is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ali Mirage.
Ali Mirage on LBC, 2 minutes past 2. In this final hour, I want to touch on something completely different. We talk a lot about mental health on the shows that I do, and indeed across the station, because it's such an important and growing challenge to the populace of this country. But this is one that is related but slightly different, which is on the front page of the Guardian newspaper today, and I thought it was very interesting. It says that psychotherapists in England must be regulated, experts say, after abuse claims rise. Let me give you a flavour of what this is about. Ministers face calls for the urgent regulation of psychotherapists and counsellors to protect vulnerable people as lawyers report a rise in lawsuits by patients for alleged harm done during therapy. Unlike most other healthcare roles, including doctors, midwives and osteopaths, psychotherapists and counsellors are not protected titles nor statutorily regulated professions in the UK. Now, experts have told the Guardian newspaper that few people realise that anyone without a qualification can call themselves a therapist and that they can continue to practice after an episode of misconduct. There has been a rise in the number of people seeking help for mental health in recent years. Of course, we know this, with services in England receiving a record 5 million referrals in 2023, up 33% from 2019. So this is a growing area, which will come as no surprise to any of us because we talk about it so much. Now, whilst the vast majority of people find professional help beneficial and even life-saving, lawyers have reported a significant increase in the number of inquiries over alleged cases of malpractice and even abuse. Although clinical psychologists are statutorily regulated, psychotherapists and counsellors can apply for accreditation at one of several bodies voluntarily. These include the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, which requires a minimum level of training and with recognised courses and operates a complaint process, although that is not legally binding. Now, this is really, really interesting because if you have a situation here where the number of people seeking with mental health issues and therefore seeking therapy is on the increase, and you have a situation where none of this is regulated. I mean, effectively, I'm sure there are many very good psychotherapists and counsellors out there, but there may be some that are using this in a inappropriate manner to control, and there are cases of very severe cases of abuse and sexual assaults being taking place, which is very, very disturbing. And you're also hearing that from the BACP, the body that I just mentioned there, a reported increase in complaints against its accredited therapists since 24%. This is very, very concerning indeed. Now, I've got two questions for you on the back of this. And I've got a personal interest in this conversation because I did 2 years of psychotherapy training. I did not do the 450 hours or whatever you have to do now to qualify to be a member of the UKCP, which is another accredited body, or BACP. But I did do 2 years of psychotherapy training, partially or mainly because I was very interested in forming deep rapport and communication skills. I find the whole thing fascinating. And I was really spent a lot of time focusing on Ericksonian psychotherapy, which is very dynamic and very contemporary, and teaches you a whole range of skills, which I think are really, really important. So I have a personal interest in the subject. My question to you is this, and I've got two. Firstly, should psychotherapists be regulated? And if you've used one and you may have had a good experience, a bad experience, but what do you think about the fact that they're not regulated at all? I mean, does that make you feel comfortable as someone who potentially is going there in a state where you could be pretty vulnerable, you could have severe mental health issues? I mean, we don't know what state you're in when you go. But how do you feel about that? Should psychotherapists be regulated? 03456060973, text 84850, ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. And another one I'm just going to chuck in as a supplementary. Have you had bad therapy? Have you had bad therapy? 03456060973. And what constitutes bad in your view? And then coming back to my first one, should it be regulated? 03456060973. Now, joining me to discuss this is David Greenwood, solicitor at Switolski's, I think, is Switolski's solicitors, specialising in therapy abuse and executive officer at the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. David, thank you very much indeed for joining me. How serious a problem is the increase in complaints against psychotherapists?
Well, it's very serious. The people go to speak to psychotherapists when they're at a very low point in their lives, and they're seeking some kind of help. So to have a situation where these types of harms are being done to vulnerable people is very serious. It's, as you said in your introduction, it is growing. I've had a threefold increase in inquiries since the pandemic. And yeah, lots of people are trying to access these services because the NHS, frankly, can't provide it. There's an 18-month waiting list in my area, at least. So people are turning to these unregulated therapists or counsellors, and you don't know what you're going to get.
What kind of complaints are you receiving?
So I suppose I have quite a fairly jaundiced view of it because I see the most serious complaints. The complaints that I have are range from financial abuse. One counsellor was charging £400 an hour and had charged this lady £50,000.
Wow.
Another one, a lady had engaged a counsellor and had the counsellor had reached the boundaries of a professional situation by wanting to be her friend. So the boundaries were blurred, and it all became quite confusing for the lady who was trying to get some help. And in the most serious cases, and I've had 2 active cases on this in the last few years, psychotherapists have essentially groomed vulnerable women. One a divorcee, one turning to him for spiritual guidance, and turned the relationship into a sexual relationship.
That is appalling. I mean, there's one piece in The Guardian which is also linked to this story on a similar case of a lady who was sexually abused by someone who she had met in the church, who was also a therapist in his spare time, and was effectively, according to her words, groomed and sexually assaulted by this. This is extremely disturbing, David. What is the way forward here? Do you think that the calls for some form of regulation now are absolutely not only justified, but inevitable?
Definitely justified, and I hope they're inevitable. I read in the same article that a former health minister, who is a psychiatrist, had plans to introduce this type of legislation. I think he's a Conservative MP. And I hope that continues. I read also that there's a campaign to bring in regulation. I hope that continues. I will certainly support it.
It's a very, very concerning situation. Thank you very much indeed, David. David Greenwood there, a solicitor at Switolski's Solicitors, specialising in therapy abuse, and Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Look, I find this extremely disturbing. I mean, for the simple reason that when you are in a situation of offering therapy of any kind, particularly psychotherapy, and as I say, I spent 2 years and a significant amount of time becoming a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, and also achieving my contemporary certificate in psychotherapy. This is very delicate stuff you're dealing with. I mean, even in my class, when I was training, I mean, it was about week 4 when everyone started crying, because there are people even who are coming to learn about how to become psychotherapists that may also be having challenging issues. And in that kind of environment where you are sharing and you're being open and a rapport is being developed with your therapist or counselor or whatever that may be, it's a relationship of trust, absolutely deep trust. Now, there are issues that can arise, of course, on dependency and codependency and all of these things, which are need to be managed very, very carefully and are concerning. But fundamentally, that relationship is one of trust, confidentiality, and security. Now, if you are in a situation where you have no idea whatsoever about the qualifications or otherwise the person who's actually helping you, supposedly helping you in inverted commas, or helping you to help yourself, because the version of psychotherapy or the kind of techniques we learned were really not about fixing anyone. I mean, fixing is the completely wrong approach. The idea is to try and help people access their own resourceful states that they may not have at the moment, but they have had, and try and access them and get them into a place where they can actually try and essentially heal themselves through conversation. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, we're not administering drugs here. We're not issuing diktats of what people should do. In fact, it's completely the wrong thing. And we were always taught never to do that. You're not instructing anything. This is about asking questions, eliciting information, getting the person in front of you to actually get into a resourceful state where they can be functional and actually deal with whatever the issue, big or small, that they are grappling with. And everyone comes to you with different things. So it's a relationship which is very intimate. You're dealing with very vulnerable people in certain cases, extremely vulnerable people. They may have suffered abuse. They may be being bullied. They may be suffering sexual trauma, all sorts of things. They may just be people who are struggling at work with stress and anxiety. It could be anything. Very delicate, very delicate. And in that, it's a relationship of trust that should not be abused. Now, if there's no regulation of this, I mean, I do find this rather odd, that there is no regulation at all. This is not a protected profession in any way. That worries me. So am I in favour of some form of regulation? Yes, because you do have it for medical practitioners and you're dealing with the most vulnerable people who are coming to you at that particular point. So I do think there is an argument to it, and I think we have to sort of thrash out what that looks like and what it is. And I also think that not only should it be regulated, you should also be required to keep yourself up to date, your techniques and everything else. And there should also be recourse for your people who you're consulting, your clients, to actually go and seek redress if they think that you have breached the boundaries or there has been inappropriate behaviour that has taken place. Otherwise, how on earth are we allowing people, the most vulnerable people here, who are seeking help, how are we actually looking after them, protecting them from a certain number of people, I would hope that it's a minority, of errant people using and abusing their position to confer advancement in relationships of a sexual kind or other forms of abuse and controlling behaviour with people sitting them in front of them in their sessions. I think it's extremely disturbing, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. Should psychotherapists be regulated, and have you had bad therapy, and what did it look like? 0345 6060973, text 84850. Ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. Ali Mirage on LBC 215.
LBC.